The Galactic Council chamber pulsed with shifting lights, each color-coded to represent the moods of the gathered species. The air, thick with the blended atmospheres of countless worlds, buzzed with urgent conversation. Tension coiled around the delegates, many of whom had abandoned decorum in favor of barely concealed panic. The crisis was beyond anything the galaxy had faced before. High Chancellor Virlon, a towering figure with translucent skin that rippled like water, struck the resonator before him, calling for silence. The noise dimmed, though anxiety still clung to the air like static. "We are gathered in the face of annihilation," Virlon declared, his voice an eerie hum. "The hive mind swarm has breached our inner colonies. The idle anomaly continues to expand, consuming everything in its path. Our outer defenses have crumbled, and our greatest weapons have proven ineffective. We have no solutions, and our time is running out." A murmur spread through the assembly, but no one refuted his words. The disasters were beyond dispute. The swarm had overrun entire systems in mere days, leaving only silence in its wake. The anomaly, a gravitational rift devouring matter at unpredictable intervals, had already erased 3 worlds, and its trajectory suggested it would soon reach the heart of the galactic core. Every species present had tried and failed to stop it. Councillor Shildrine of the Zalari, a species known for their logic and caution, flicked her pale fronds in agitation. "We have exhausted our options. Diplomacy has failed. Our weapons are useless. There must be something we have not considered." Councillor Gorthun, a Bractorian encased in heavy chitin, rumbled a deep growl. "We have considered everything. Every strategy, every technology, every alliance. The galaxy has never faced such a dual crisis before. Even if we somehow hold back the swarm, the anomaly will consume us all." Across the chamber, a nervous delegate shifted. Then another. Some whispered. A single word floated among them, a name unspoken yet lingering. "Humans." Virlon exhaled slowly. "Let us not indulge in reckless suggestions." A small, hooded figure stepped forward, a voice calm despite the storm brewing in the chamber. "Recklessness may be our only path to survival." All eyes turned to Councillor Tharvesh of the Vrali. He was among the few who had openly advocated for humanity's inclusion in major galactic affairs. It had earned him no shortage of derision. Shildrine's voice was sharp. "You propose that we entrust our survival to Deathworlders?" The term hung in the air like a curse. Deathworlders, a classification for species that had evolved on planets so inhospitable that their very existence defied probability. Humanity was the most infamous among them. Their history was a tapestry woven with war, resilience, and an unnerving ability to adapt. Gorthun's mandibles clicked. "They are unpredictable, aggressive, dangerous." Tharvesh did not flinch. "They are also the only species that has repeatedly succeeded where others have failed. They thrive on catastrophe. Their history is one of surviving extinction events of their own making and overcoming crises beyond reason. The anomaly devours entire worlds. Humans have fought against their own planet trying to kill them. The swarm cannot be reasoned with. Humans have battled foes that sought their eradication since their first steps into space." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "And they win." A sharp chime signaled disapproval from a cluster of Murati delegates, their crystalline bodies pulsing with agitation. They are a primitive race with reckless instincts. Their solutions often involve destruction on a scale even the swarm would admire. Tharvesh smiled faintly. "Perhaps destruction is precisely what we need." Silence. Virlon's liquid-like features shimmered with unease. "Even if we wish to contact them, it would not matter. Humans are not bound by our laws, but they are aware of the crisis. If they had a solution, they would have presented it." Tharvesh hesitated. "There is something else?" The room stilled. "They are already moving." Shildrine's fronds twitched violently. "What?" Tharvesh's expression was unreadable. "Human fleets have mobilized. Covertly. They have been gathering resources, preparing for intervention. They did not ask permission. They do not intend to. They act while we deliberate. Outrage erupted. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices a cacophony of indignation and fear. It was unheard of, insulting, dangerous, but none could deny the weight of it. Virlon raised a hand, demanding silence once more. His eyes burned with something unreadable. Then we must ask ourselves a question. Are we prepared to stand in their way? The chamber fell deathly quiet. The realization settled like a stone in deep water. For the first time in recorded history, the fate of the galaxy did not rest in the hands of the Council. It rested in the hands of Deathworlders. The bridge of the UNS Valkyrie pulsed with quiet urgency, the low hum of consoles and soft murmur of voices forming a steady rhythm against the controlled chaos. Captain Elias Rains stood at the central display, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the tactical overlays projected above the table. He had fought in countless battles, but this was different. This was survival on a scale no war had ever prepared them for. A voice crackled through the comms. All task forces report ready, Captain. The payloads are primed, and the engineering teams say we've got a 68% chance of keeping the reactor stable when we engage. 68%. Not great, but better than nothing. Rains turned his head slightly, glancing at Lieutenant Commander Naomi Voss, the ship's tactical officer. Her sharp eyes were locked onto the screen, lips pressed in a thin line. She was calm, but he knew her well enough to see the tension in the set of her shoulders. He didn't blame her. What they were about to attempt was nothing short of insanity. 68% is optimistic, came another voice, Dr. Adrian Kessler, lead astrophysicist and arguably the only person on board who fully understood the implications of what they were about to attempt. He leaned against the railing, arms crossed, his disheveled appearance doing little to hide the brilliance lurking behind his tired eyes. But let's assume the reactor holds. That still leaves the problem of the anomaly's gravitational instability. If we miscalculate the field harmonics by even a fraction— We don't, Rains interrupted. We can't. Kessler exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. I hope you're as lucky as the history books say, Captain. Luck had nothing to do with it. Luck hadn't kept humanity alive through centuries of war, resource shortages, and near-extinction events. Luck hadn't built the fleets currently defying the Galactic Council's authority, nor had it forged the minds that now work tirelessly to do the impossible. Humanity thrived in catastrophe. Rains turned back to the display. The operation was split into two fronts. The first, a direct strike against the swarm's primary advance. A brutal engagement designed to halt their momentum long enough for the second front to enact the real solution. It wasn't about victory. It was about disruption. The second was even more audacious. A controlled detonation at the heart of the Idle anomaly using repurposed exotic matter warheads. If their calculations were correct, the resulting energy pulse would collapse the unstable singularity before it reached the galactic core. If they were wrong, well, then the anomaly would consume them first and the rest of the galaxy shortly after. A calculated risk, the kind humanity had always been willing to take. Voss tapped the console, highlighting the projected engagement zone. Swarm Vanguard is moving faster than predicted. We'll have less time to execute Phase 1 before they adapt. Rain studied the map. Then we'll just have to hit them harder. Commander Shaw, his fleet coordinator, arched a brow. Define harder. He gestured toward the far-right flank of the holographic battlefield. Move Task Force Beta to Sector 6. Have them run full-burn micro-jumps in rapid succession. If we time it right, we'll disrupt the swarm's tactical cohesion before they can adjust. Shaw blinked. That's a suicide maneuver. Rains nodded. So was Normandy. So was Operation Winter's Edge. So was every fight we've ever been in where we weren't supposed to win. Shaw was silent for a beat, then let out a slow breath. Aye, sir. The human fleet began to move. Valkyrie's engines roared as the ship accelerated, her escorts forming up in tight formation around her. Across the void, the first wave of swarm vessels flickered into view. Chitinous leviathans that moved with eerie fluidity, their numbers vast enough to blot out the stars. Engagement in 60 seconds, Voss reported, voice steady. Rains activated the fleet-wide comms. All units, this is Captain Rains. You know why we're here. The Council won't act. The other species won't risk what we're willing to risk. That leaves us. That's always left us. We do the impossible, not because we're fearless, but because fear doesn't change what needs to be done. We do this for every world that still stands, for every species that can't fight for themselves. We do this because it's who we are. A pause. Make them remember. The moment stretched, then the battle erupted. Human warships engaged with a ferocity that defied logic. They moved in ways alien tacticians had never considered. Rapid course corrections, precision jumps that flirted with the limits of physics, coordinated missile strikes that turned the darkness into an inferno. The swarm retaliated with overwhelming force. Beams of searing plasma cut through the void, their bioorganic projectiles tearing into hulls with ruthless efficiency. Human ships burned, but they did not falter. They adapted, adjusted, retaliated. They fought like cornered predators, not prey. Somewhere in the chaos, Task Force Beta executed their reckless maneuver. A dozen ships blinked in and out of existence in rapid succession, their micro-jumps scrambling the swarm's tactical formations, forcing them into disorder. It was a desperate, violent strategy, but it worked. It always worked. On the Valkyrie, Kessler was barking calculations, adjusting for variables that changed by the second. Detonation window closing. We need to fire now, or the entire cascade equation collapses. Rains didn't hesitate. Do it. The warheads launched. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, light erupted from the anomaly's core, a brilliance that swallowed everything in its path. The swarm hesitated just for a second, but in war a second was an eternity. Valkyrie's engines flared as the fleet disengaged, breaking free just as the collapsing anomaly dragged everything around it into oblivion. Swarm vessels caught in the gravitational shift were crushed in an instant, their vast forms crumbling into dust. The battlefield fell silent. On the bridge, no one moved, no one breathed. Then, Kessler let out a weak laugh, slumping against the console. Holy hell! It worked! Voss exhaled, shaking her head. Never doubted it. Rains allowed himself a small, tired smile. Outside, the surviving human ships were regrouping. They had won. For now. But the war wasn't over. And the galaxy had just learned what happened when humanity refused to lose. The void was never silent. It sang in radiation pulses and the crackle of distant stars, in the dying echoes of ships reduced to slag and the whispered static of broken comm channels. It roared now, filled with the guttural shrieks of the swarm, the rhythmic thrum of human railguns, the desperate, gasping breath of a battle that had stretched far beyond its breaking point. Captain Elias Rains stood firm on the Valkyrie S bridge, the dim red emergency lights painting deep shadows across his face. His knuckles were white against the console as he took in the battle unfolding beyond the reinforced glass. Wreckage littered the void, a graveyard of broken vessels, human, alien, and swarm alike. The anomaly was gone, collapsed in a blaze of desperate ingenuity, but the war was not over. The swarm had recoiled, yes, but now they came with renewed fury, their vast, nightmarish forms undeterred by the loss of their vanguard. They're adapting, Lieutenant Commander Naomi Voss said, voice tight. Tactical readjustment, non-linear movement. They're learning from us. They always do, Rains muttered. The swarm wasn't just a horde. It was an intelligence, shifting and reshaping itself to counter whatever stood in its way. And now, humanity stood alone. The Council fleets had yet to arrive. The species they fought for, bled for, died for had stayed back, still paralyzed by their own fear, their own inability to comprehend what needed to be done. The message had been sent, the call had been made, but as of now, humanity remained the only force between the swarm and the core worlds. Forward shields down to 28%, Ensign Darrow called from the defense grid station, his voice cracking. We can't keep taking this kind of punishment. Rain stared at the tactical display, jaw tight. The swarm ships moved like a living organism, weaving between the burning remnants of the battlefield, forming a new front even as human forces tried to regroup. There was no victory here. Only survival, asterisk, asterisk. Reroute power from the aft batteries. Voss ordered. If they're going to try and cut us off, we make them pay for every damn inch. On the screen, another ship, asterisk, asterisk, Endeavor, asterisk, asterisk, was swallowed whole, its hull breached in a dozen places before it was silenced. A deep, unnatural pulse followed. An eerie vibration felt through the deck plating as the swarm fed. Rain's fists clenched. He had seen war. He had fought losing battles before. But this was something else. A new contact blinked onto the display. Then another. Then dozens. Unknown vessels dropping from FTL, Darrow reported, his voice sharp with disbelief. Multiple signatures. Standby for ID. The view screen flickered and Rain saw them. Sleek, crystalline hulls, towering organic constructs, massive war engines that belonged to species that had once scoffed at humanity's place among them. The Council fleets had come. "This is Admiral Kayles of the Zalari Defense Initiative." A voice boomed over the comms, deep and resonant. "Human forces, stand your ground. We fight together." Across the void, weapons fired anew. Not just human munitions, but energy beams of staggering intensity, ion bursts that disrupted swarm formations, gravitational pulses that sent enemy vessels careening into one another. For the first time since the battle had begun, the swarm hesitated. Rains exhaled, pressing his hands flat against the console. "Took you long enough?" Voss let out a sharp, breathless laugh, shaking her head. "Guess they finally decided we were worth saving." "Not saving," Rains murmured, watching as the tides of battle shifted. "Following." Because the truth was evident now, even to the most stubborn of the galactic elite. Humanity had not simply fought to survive. They had led the charge, faced extinction head-on, and refused to surrender when others faltered. And now, at last, the galaxy was beginning to understand. The war was not yet over. But for the first time, it was not humanity alone who carried its weight. The battlefield was quiet now. Not silent, never silent, but the screams of dying ships, the thunder of weapons fire, the relentless shriek of the swarm had finally faded. What remained was the wreckage of war, a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered hulls, floating lifelessly in the endless black. Captain Elias Rain stood on the Valkyrie S bridge, staring at the debris field stretching before them. Among the ruins lay the broken remnants of human warships, their sacrifice etched into the void itself. But scattered among them were the husks of swarm vessels, burned-out husks that would no longer consume, no longer spread. They had won, or at the very least they had survived. "Status?" he asked, voice rough from exhaustion. Lieutenant Commander Naomi Voss scanned the readouts, her fingers moving sluggishly over the controls. Fleet integrity at 34%. Damage to primary systems across all ships. "We've lost," she hesitated, exhaling sharply. "We've lost a lot." Rains closed his eyes for a moment. He didn't need the numbers. He already knew what it had cost them. A transmission blinked to life on the main screen. The image flickered before stabilizing, revealing High Chancellor Virlon of the Galactic Council. His translucent form rippled like liquid, unreadable as ever, but the tension in his posture was unmistakable. "Captain Rains," Virlon said, his voice devoid of its usual controlled detachment. "The Council extends its deepest gratitude." Rains stared at him. The words rang hollow, a diplomatic pleasantry in the face of something raw and unforgivable. "You mean you're grateful we didn't die?" A ripple passed through Virlon's form, an expression of unease. "That is not untrue." A second screen lit up, this time showing Admiral Kayles of the Zalari. His crystalline form reflected the dim light of his ship's damaged bridge, his normally impassive expression drawn with something resembling respect. "Your people fought when we would not," Kayles said. "We stood back, waiting for certainty. You acted in the face of the unknown. We owe you more than gratitude." Rains didn't reply immediately. Instead, he looked at the bridge around him, at his crew. Tired, battered, but standing, humanity had bled for this war, had saved those who deemed them reckless, dangerous, unpredictable. And now, Now the galaxy understood. The swarm will return. Voss murmured beside him, voice low. Rains nodded. And next time, we won't be the only ones fighting. The transmission remained open, but the silence spoke louder than words. Humanity had changed the course of history, not through diplomacy, not through appeasement, but through sheer, unrelenting will. And the galaxy would never be the same again.